Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This will be my Star Wars Acolyte trailer that they dropped at Star Wars Celebration. They didn't make it public, so I have to be a little careful about the way I do this breakdown, but it's set during the High Republic era 100 years before The Phantom Menace. Of course, I'll do episode videos for it when it releases. Be sure to subscribe to get them. It sounds like the release is going to be sometime towards the middle, maybe like the second half of 2024, because Star Wars Skeleton Crew is going to be done before that. That'll air before Acolyte. Lee Jung-jae from Squid Game is playing a Jedi Master who appears very prominently in the trailer. The actual trailer footage opens at the Jedi Academy on Coruscant with Lee Jung-jae's Jedi Master character leading a class of younglings. We don't know what his name is, the name of his Jedi Master. There's a Tar-Sunt Jedi Padawan character here, more alien Jedi coming. Outside of Grogu and Ahsoka in present day, there aren't a ton of alien Jedi. Maybe we'll see more. During his voiceover, he tells them, "Close your eyes can be deceived. We must not trust them." That's meant to be foreshadowing for the Sith group that exists, or the dark side practitioners that are turning into the Sith, that'll serve as the primary antagonist during the series, hiding under the Jedi's noses in plain sight. Like, the whole idea is that how is Palpatine able to deceive the Jedi Council? How is he able to exist right under their noses? It sounds like Lee Jung-jae's character is one of the few Jedi Masters during this period about 100 years before Phantom Menace who senses the Sith are becoming a great threat again, like the dark side of the Force is starting to amass more power. Whereas most of the Jedi Council during this period, the other Jedi don't believe that yet. Like, for example, Yoda would still be on the Jedi Council during this period. It'd just be a much younger version of Yoda. But the idea is they become so dogmatic that they don't think that the dark side is a problem, because during the High Republic era, that's meant to be like peak Jedi era. There are more Jedi alive and active in the galaxy than any other period in the history of the galaxy. So the Jedi Order has become so powerful, they become so overconfident in themselves, they're not really worried about the dark side of the Force. Which is where you get to the beginning of their downfall. Like, the series is charting the beginning of the end of the Jedi Order. He said his Jedi explores a lot of complex emotions in a way that modern Jedi during the fall of the Republic, the prequels era, had abandoned, which makes him sound a little bit more like Qui-Gon Jinn, which the Star Wars people like George Lucas, Dave Filoni have talked about when comparing Qui-Gon Jinn to the other Jedi Masters from the prequels. They said that Qui-Gon Jinn was meant to be more like the really old school Jedi from long ago in the Old Republic, the High Republic era, that were more willing to embrace the living Force, and they tried to follow the true will of the Force as opposed to what the Jedi Council wanted them to do. Qui-Gon ultimately tried to follow the will of the living Force as opposed to the goals that were put out by the Jedi Council, like the will of the Masters versus serving the true intentions of the Force itself. George Lucas was really big on this idea, too, that the Jedi, by the events of the prequels, had grown too dogmatic and stuck in their ways before Order 66 goes down. And a big part of Anakin Skywalker being this child of the Force, meant to bring balance to the Force, this prophecy about the Force, was all about balancing the dark side with the light side, and part of that was Anakin balancing the light side out so that the future Force practitioners might return to something more akin to the Bendu and the way Qui-Gon Jinn practiced the Force, as opposed to writing up a Bible of their own rules, their own interpretation, and following that instead. Then we see Amandla Stenberg's mystery lead character walking through a city here, getting ready to attack Carrie-Anne Moss's Jedi Master character. You notice the structure here that she walks under is right out of the Ralph McQuarrie concept art. They also use that same structure during The Force Awakens on Jakku, but I don't think this planet is meant to be Jakku. As she continues to walk through the markets on the street, Lee Jung-jae's Jedi Master character goes on saying, "The Force is powerful." As Amandla Stenberg approaches Carrie-Anne Moss's character, he ends his voiceover by saying, "It is power we must respect," respecting the power of the Force. As you see Carrie-Anne Moss get into a knockdown, drag-out martial arts fight with her without lightsabers, Amandla Stenberg's character is using two knives.
The tone of the show, which is very much inspired by martial arts films.
Like I said, the fight scene is inspired by classic wushu kung fu movies like The Matrix, Carrie-Anne Moss coming from the Matrix movies, so this is very familiar. Maybe we'll get some Terakasi Jedi martial arts references and Easter eggs. They also have the team that did all the fights for the Shang-Chi movie, so it sounds like they're going to be hardcore. Then we see Charlie Bartlett's Jedi character, he gets some brief screen time. Then they end the trailer by getting ready for a real gritty, knockdown, drag-out lightsaber battle with 8 Jedi igniting their lightsabers, including Daphne Keen's Jedi character.
We know how to do that.
We had a couple like off-screen saber fights.
Yeah, we did.
Ooh, Daphne broke a saber.
No, shush! Why would you say that?
strong,
Actually, if it was
powerful.
3, but okay.
True. And they come in like
Nice.
private briefcases too, so it's like
Yeah,
a
it was
big
really
deal,
bad.
you know?
No, it was really bad. It was actually really. The
Real.
prop people were like, "You need to stop," and I was like, "I'm really sorry. I'm not doing it on purpose."
Most of you remember her as X-23 from the Logan movie. Even though it was cut off during some of the footage that was released from the trailer online briefly, there was a brief shot of a Nemoidian during this too. They're from the Trade Federation, figure heavily into the Separatists in the beginning of what happens during Phantom Menace. They revealed that Jason Suotamo, who plays Chewbacca in the sequel trilogy, is going to be playing the Wookiee Jedi, who I believe is meant to be Buri Yaga. Right now, a little bit earlier in the timeline, during all the comics and the books that they're doing during the High Republic era, he's a Jedi Padawan, but I believe by the events of this series, he'll become a full Jedi Knight. Rebecca Henderson is playing Vernesta Rowe, who appears during those other High Republic comics and stories they're doing right now, but by the events of this series, she's become a Jedi Master. The official plot synopsis just reads, The Acolyte is a mystery thriller that will take viewers to a galaxy of shadowy secrets and emerging dark side powers in the final days of the High Republic era, which is why I say it takes place closer to the events of Phantom Menace. A former Padawan reunites with her Jedi Master to investigate a series of crimes, but the forces they confront are more sinister than they ever anticipated, so it's sort of the idea of the Sith rearing their heads again, because up to the events of Revenge of the Sith, the Emperor had kept the Sith relatively quiet and under the radar. The same was true of his master Darth Plagueis, and then all the way back to Darth Bane. That was all part of the rule of two, to stay under the radar so that the Jedi wouldn't bother them. So they're implying that at least a couple of the Jedi will discover that the Sith are alive and well and continuing to practice, and something bad will probably happen to them to prevent them from telling someone like Master Yoda, for instance, who's still very much alive and much younger during this period in the timeline. So you think that the much younger version of Yoda would be much quicker to jump on this Sith problem, like, we gotta take care of that right now, nip it in the bud. It just means something is going to stop those Jedi that discover it from telling the truth to the rest of the Jedi Council. The main character is being played by Amanda Stenberg, and she's playing someone called Aura. She's the person that gets tied up with this acolyte group of characters trying to become Sith apprentices. You notice she's wearing a t-shirt from The Mandalorian. That's a Mandalorian t-shirt. Keeping it in the Star Wars family. Manny Jacinto also just joined the series. You remember him from The Good Place. Jodie Turner-Smith, Rebecca Henderson, Dean Charles Chapman, who most of you remember is Tommen from the Game of Thrones series. I did episode videos for all those. They didn't say who most of them are playing. The only one we really know a lot about is the main character, Amanda Stenberg, this Aura character. Supposedly, the way that the Acolyte Episode 1 is meant to pick up is that it starts on a planet called Sanshiro, where she and her sister are from. It's a world mostly made up of marshlands, snowy mountains, and this Aura character and her sister, her family, live in a village that's frequently attacked by primitive, tribal beings. They get attacked during the events of Episode 1, and they're fought off by the Jedi of that period. And because Aura is force sensitive, after that first attack, they take Aura with them for training, but they leave her sister behind, so she's separated from her family. Very standard practice for the Jedi to separate people from their families, all about attachments, not good thing. Everybody saw the prequels, we know how that went down for Anakin Skywalker. That's why most of the time when Jedi are taken from their families, it's before they've been able to form attachments to them, like before they're old enough to actually form memories. That's why Obi-Wan Kenobi can barely remember his own family. He even talked about that during the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. Like, there's an Obi-Wan Kenobi brother that's alive somewhere in the galaxy. There's another Kenobi out there somewhere. But when the Jedi take Aura to start her training, the village is attacked again, the Jedi are too late, and her grandparents wind up getting killed off. And because her grandparents were killed, her sister's left alone. She doesn't want to leave her sister, but the Jedi won't let her take her sister with her back to Coruscant in the Jedi Temple. So you start to see the conflict and the reason why she starts to hate the Jedi and starts down the dark path to the Sith.
Leslie likes to say that the show is a combination of Frozen and Kill Bill, which is kind of a nuts combo.
Because of the relationship between the sisters at the beginning of the series, the main characters, and how the main character evolves into more of a dark version of Uma Thurman's bride character during Kill Bill, going on an epic revenge quest, except she's trying to get revenge against the Jedi Order. As you see during the trailer, she goes up against Carrie-Anne Moss's Jedi Master character, having a knockdown, drag-out martial arts fight with the Jedi Master. Once she starts down the dark path, eventually she joins a group of acolytes, thus the title of the show, a group of Darkside Force trainees that are trying to become Sith apprentices. And it sounds like all these acolytes are forced to perform a bunch of trials and fight each other, and the winner will become the next Sith apprentice. And that's their way of working within the canon, the rule of two. There must only ever be two official Sith at any given time, but there are many dark side Force users. Like, you have this group of acolytes, but they're not traditional Sith. You have to remember the difference between Sith and just regular dark side Force users. The Sith were actually a race of beings that intermingled with a bunch of dark side Force users that kind of took over their culture. Eventually what happened though is that there was this great Jedi-Sith war about 1,000 years ago. Darth Bane wound up being the only member of the Sith Order to survive that. He created the Rule of Two to help the Sith persevere, and thus it's continued to present day. Long before that, when the dark side Force users took over the Sith culture and started intermingling with them, it was more of a traditional build up this giant Sith empire and then conquer the galaxy kind of thing, where you have many Sith practitioners. The whole idea going forward after Darth Bane is that they would stay off the radar, and thus the Jedi wouldn't think of them as a threat or even think about them at all. But one of the things they're going to do during the series is that it won't just be like Breaking Bad in the Star Wars universe. I mean, it might be a little bit of that. Is that they'll show you why some of the things that the Jedi were teaching were bad, like why the Jedi Order became kind of stagnant. The whole idea with Grogu's character later during the events of The Mandalorian and him rejecting Luke Skywalker in the Jedi Order is their way of showing you that Grogu is rejecting the old Jedi Order, because that's kind of what's going on with Luke Skywalker's Jedi Temple. That's the reason why it failed during the events of the sequel movies, because he started to make the same mistakes as the old Jedi Order because he was trying to teach the old hits, basically. Like he was trying to orchestrate his Jedi Temple and his teachings the same way that the old Jedi Order did, like play the hits. So the whole promise with the Grogu character much later in the timeline, and hopefully this will play out in future series and future movies, is that we'll see Grogu take the Jedi Order in a completely new direction that's completely different from the Jedi that came before, like Yoda. But just remember that Grogu is only about 50 years old during the events of The Mandalorian. He's about the same age as Anakin Skywalker, which is why we have all those theories about how there might be a twist with the prophecy, that the child of prophecy might not just be Anakin Skywalker, it could also be Grogu. Like Grogu will also bring balance to the Force. Like I said, just based on what they've talked about with the timeline of the series, the closest we get to like really big Easter egg characters would be like very young version of Palpatine.
Did you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise?
We've been making the jokes about Palpatine and his master Darth Plagueis for so many years now. Palpatine won't yet be old enough to become Plagueis' apprentice at the end of the series. Like, this is meant to take place a little bit before that. So we might actually see Darth Plagueis show up during the series and then pay off some of his research into defying death, influencing the midichlorians to either create or extend life. That was the whole tale that he was telling to Anakin Skywalker. He was basically trying to explain to him in so many words how he essentially learned how to influence the midichlorians and thus master life and death and then kill his master. Like, that's the whole idea, is that there are only ever two Sith at any given time, and usually the apprentice winds up killing the master, and that's how you become a Sith master. So that also might be one of the big twists of the series, is that when the main character becomes a Sith apprentice, eventually she will kill whoever the master winds up being. And because this is mostly a Sith-based series, I don't know how much time we're going to spend on Coruscant with other people like the younger Yoda and the other Jedi during that era. We also just got the Ahsoka extended trailer. There was an Ahsoka panel where they talked more about the series. They revealed that Lars Mikkelsen is coming back as Thrawn, and they released another trailer, like a second trailer with a whole bunch more footage in it. I'll do a breakdown of that tomorrow. My full Mandalorian Season 3 Episode 7 video will also post on Wednesday after they release it. There's going to be a bunch of big reveals pushing into the Ahsoka series, which is going to air later this year. So just a reminder that the Acolyte series isn't meant to be connected to the Mandalorian or the Thrawn plot that's happening right now. It's set 100 years before Phantom Menace and is dealing with a completely different series of events and is setting up a completely different part of the timeline. Everyone click here for my Ahsoka trailer video, and click here to learn about all the brand new Star Wars movies like the Thrawn movie that they're making. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.